How's it going, everybody? Welcome back to the channel, and yes, I am finally back with another review. And today I wanted to take a bit of a step back and just a bit of a time jump back. It's not even that far away, but I wanted to review a show that I watched recently. Back then I didn't watch it because I didn't have that much of an interest, and also I was younger than the ratings actually showed. But now I finally got the chance to watch this show, and most of you probably already know what show it is. If you haven't, then you definitely have to go watch this show. It is #1 on IMDb. And if you guys didn't get by my hints, then I am talking about the show Breaking Bad. It came out a few years ago. Well, I think it's already been like 10 or so. The show's getting older, okay? And that is nothing to be ashamed of because it is still the same quality that it was when it came out. Like all that hype and everything, it's still there. And I just really love this show, and I just felt the need to talk about it. I know that it's old, and usually I try to cover more pressing topics, but I found it to be an extremely interesting show that I just had to talk about it. And I want to talk about older movies and older things because the cinema industry, yes, it's ever changing, but there's also a lot of things before that I can talk about. There's a lot of movies, there's a lot of shows. And I think that talking about Breaking Bad is going to be super important. So let's go a bit into my review. Again, I do spoil, but if you haven't watched it, then you've had 10 years to prepare. But now I will be talking about Breaking Bad, all 5 seasons. I will be ranking them. I will be ranking the entire show. I will be ranking every season. And I'm just going to be talking a bit about what happens and what I find to be the best parts of the show. In the show, the beginning of the show basically just starts off with Walter White getting his cancer diagnosis. And so this is where Breaking Bad really begins. He gets diagnosed with cancer, gets into the drug trade, and then becomes Heisenberg, and he becomes this really big scale drug trafficker. At the end of the show, Heisenberg dies. Everyone knows that, like everyone that's watched the show knows this. And like I said, already I gave a spoiler warning, so don't come at me in the comment section. But let's just talk a bit more about what happens in the show. Heisenberg, or Walter White, meets a young man, which he already had in one of his classes. He is a chemistry teacher. Well, he's kind of dead now. But he was a chemistry teacher of Jesse Pinkman. Jesse Pinkman is a kid that passed high school and he dropped out of college or didn't even go to college and just started getting into the drug trade because like in real life, the show is very centered like near real life, and so you see that the drug trade has a ton of money and a ton of these different prospects that will make you very rich, but it's also very illegal. So I do not recommend you get into that trade, but if you do, you will be getting very rich. In the show, you have Jesse kind of teaching Walter what happens in the drug trade, and then you have Walter teaching Jesse how to properly cook meth and how pure it is. So people start to see all of this happening. You have a ton of seasons in the middle, and there's a lot that just happens where, you know, you have Jesse getting a really toxic girlfriend. Well, he was kind of toxic to her. He kind of got her back into drugs, but really toxic girlfriend, and then she ends up dying, and Walter watches her die. You have the part where Hank, which is Walter White's brother-in-law, arresting Walter. You have a ton of different things that happen in the show, and every single episode is a different adventure. You have I don't even know how many episodes it is, but it spans 5 seasons, and it's about 18 episodes every season. Some might be 13, and just every episode something. It's not that you get left off on a cliffhanger every episode, but you get so much, like everything, just like it follows a perfect story. You don't feel like it breaks off. You don't see that many filler content because, like I said, it's 13 or 18 episodes per season, and so you don't really see those cutoffs that often like you would see in a show like The Flash or Arrow that has 22 episodes to fill, and so you will get these filler episodes, but in this you don't have that many filler episodes. You might have like one, but it ends up being important later on. Everything that happens at the beginning will have an effect in the end. And that is expressed perfectly by this show. There's a lot of shows that kind of just forget about their first season or just kind of try to nostalgia fest it. But this one, like something that Walter did in the first season comes back to haunt him in the fifth. For example, in the third season, at the end of it, Gus Fring is dead. And so now you have Walter. It shows up that he poisoned a kid to get Jesse back on his side to go up against Gus. And so at the end of the show, you see how Jesse finds out that Walter was the one that poisoned the kid. And everything just comes full circle. And at the beginning of the show, you have a good, pure Walter White. And at the end of the show, you have a man who broke bad and became a big, hardened criminal that basically just ended up killing everybody and making millions of dollars. I think his net worth at the end of the show was like 100 million. It was insane. And the show, I want to go real quick into seasons and just then go into the overarching show. The first season was amazing. It was the perfect entrance to the show. It gave every character its perfect story and motivation and why they are the way that they are. You have Walter's motivation for starting the drug trade. You have Skyler and Walter in this, like, she's pregnant, and so he's not being there that much because he's prioritizing the money that he's trying to make for when he passes away. He wants his family to have a certain amount of money. And so you have Skyler, kind of like him and Skyler kind of just like drifting apart. I don't know how the show does it, but the bad guy is supposed to be Walter. Nobody really sees Walter White as a bad guy. Everybody really likes him, and everybody is really rooting for him. In opposing views, like a lot of people look at Skyler and they think that she's actually the villain of the show, which isn't true. I don't feel like there's that many villains in the show. I would say that Gus Fring is a villain of the show, but I don't really think that Walter classifies as a villain of the show, because for a lot of the show, his motivations are there's something that most people can actually stand by. You know, doing this for your family because you know that you're gonna end up dying is something that I think a lot of people would think, yeah, that's pretty noble of him. But at the end, he does reveal that he did it for himself because he felt alive and not just some boring chemistry school teacher. But I went on a bit of a side tangent right there. The first season is just amazing because it sets up Jesse Pinkman, it sets up Walter, and their bond that they have consistently throughout the show. No matter how bad things get, Walter will always care about Jesse, and Jesse will always look up to Walter. That is how this show always works, and that is how it just moved on throughout the show. Even at the very end, like the last episode, you have a Jesse that hates Walter but refuses to hurt him. And there's just a lot of things that happen. And the first season, it's very basic. You don't it's the introduction of Tuco when they start working with him, but it doesn't get as complicated as per se the fifth season, which I will be going into that one a bit later. But it introduces them going from being small-time drug dealers and doing it in an RV to then going and working for a bigger crime boss that is crazy, and that is how the first season ends. They find out that Tuco Salamanca is crazy just because he beats up a guy for just saying nothing, basically. Then, kills the guy. He doesn't even just beat him up. Then the second season, we have they're starting to get a bit more involved in this, and they don't want to work for another Tuco because Tuco was very bad, and Hank already killed him. And so then we have the second part of this season where they find Saul Goodman, which is a lawyer, and Saul Goodman knows a guy who knows a guy that can really exponentially bring this drug trade out. And so I kind of blended the seasons together, but yeah, they're doing that transition in the second and the third season to where they start working with Gus Fring. And Gus Fring at the beginning, he's a good boss. He starts doing like very well, but then Walter and Jesse start doing some very questionable things. Very like the way that the audience sees it is that Walter and Jesse are completely right about their actions, just because they're the main characters and they're the characters that we follow. But in all honesty, yes, Gus Fring was okay. Well, like, no, he wasn't okay because he did outlaw it, but he was okay with the use of children at some point, like children in the drug trade, like children being able to deal the drugs and stuff like that, because it makes it easier and cheaper for him to export. But then Jesse got mad, and then they went off on this whole entire murdering spree just because Gus pissed them off. And for some reason, the tides turned, and instead of Gus really wanting Walter, he then really wanted Jesse, because Jesse knew the formula, and Jesse, like, he was a lot more susceptible to manipulation than Walter was. Walter at the beginning, he was really susceptible to manipulation because you said, like, hey, think about your family, you need this, and you need this, and so once you got this, you'll be able to give them the life that they're going to be able to have. Skyler finds out that Walter, like, I'm combining the second and the third season in this, but Skyler finds out that Walter is a drug dealer, and she kind of like resents him at first. They get a divorce, and well, the divorce never actually goes through. What a surprise. You don't want to divorce a drug dealer that's making millions of dollars every month. But so at the beginning, she's very hard to understand. But then when we roll into the fourth season, she becomes his money launderer, and so she helps him in the drug trade, actually. And that's where it becomes super interesting, because not just did Walter break bad, but she did too. She cheated on him, and she became this whole terrible person. And so he kind of just got caught up in the middle of that emotional drama, where all he was doing was just cooking meth, and she was just like kind of like taking advantage of that. And so you kind of have them getting a bit more together in the fourth season. Gus Fring dies, or he's already dead. Yeah, he dies. You have Jesse really, like, he goes clean, stops doing drugs, and so he starts to really like date a girl and be all good and try to get his life back in order. But then, like I said at the beginning, Walter poisons this kid, and so he decides that for the greater good of this family, that he's gonna get separated, because they're gonna get really involved in this, and he just wants them to be safe. So he does that, and just, you have this whole character arc. By this point, now Walter has become a bad guy. Well, a bad guy is the truth. He did poison a kid, and Jesse, he started from this bad kid that was a drug addict, and then he slowly turned good. And I know that a lot of people see him as he does somewhat become like a villain at the end, depending for who you're rooting for. If you're rooting for Walter to end up escaping the cops and doing everything well, then you stop liking Jesse, because then he goes to Hank, and then Hank and him work together to try to get Walter arrested, but it doesn't take. And so by the time we're in the fifth season is just the perfect conclusion to it all. It starts with a few time jumps, and then it shows the build up to that, and then it shows the year that Walter was in like solitary, well, not really solitary, but he disappeared from the face of the planet, and it shows him losing his family. It shows the effects of what his actions did, and I think that is perfect, because when it comes full circle, he kind of realizes all the pain. Well, he does realize all the pain that he caused. Hank ends up dying because of him, and so you just have a Walter that is now just bloodthirsty for revenge. He wants to take out the neo-Nazis that killed Hank, took all of his money, and so that's exactly how the show ends. They take out the neo-Nazis, and Walter ends up dying, and Jesse ends up escaping. Well, not really. Well, he was in captivity for a while, because Walter asked them like sent out a hit on him, and instead of killing him, these neo-Nazis were just using Jesse. But you have such an amazing ending to the show. Usually shows have a really good beginning but a really terrible ending, just because you don't know how to end a show like this. And I still feel like I would have wanted to see more of Walter and Jesse and just how their story pans out. But the issue with that is that you see too much, you see too close to you get too close to the sun. If you get too close to the sun, you're gonna get burned. And so the best thing to do is leave it while it's good, because like we've seen with the Flash, like we've seen with Arrow, like we've seen with other shows, they're really strong at their beginning seasons, and then they end up losing popularity, and their show ends up becoming worse and degrading just because of how long you go. And there's only so far that you can go with this story. But I think that they ended it perfectly, because nobody has any lingering doubts. Yes, you have the lingering doubt, like, oh, what the hell happened with Jesse? But then they make a movie called El Camino, which actually goes into and explains what happens with Jesse after the events of the finale. You have this perfect full circle ending that I really loved, and I think that the show ended it perfectly, and I think that everything that happened in the show was just great. So I have no complaints there. The first season, I rank it in 8.8 out of 10. It was really great, but it was kind of slow. You have a bit of a slow build-up, but that's kind of what you get when you're trying to build up all these characters. And so it does build up very slowly, but I thought that it was very good. The second and third season, I usually blend them together because it's like that middle point where they're still cooking, but then they turn into, with Gus, I'd give that like a 9, a solid 9. That's amazing. I really liked it. So 8.8, 9. And then the fourth season, which is also a really great season, and a season that I really found to be pretty interesting, I'd give it like 8.9 out of 10. I really like the past two seasons, like before this one. But season number 5, and I'm not gonna average these up, I'm just gonna give like a ballpark estimate of what I think that the show should get. The season number 5 was for me the perfect conclusion to a show like this, and it is probably one of the most perfect conclusions that I've seen from any show. And movie also, because movies also, they tend to not know how to finish off the like with enough closure and enough so that people are happy. And I think that this show did that. But a lot of people did want to see Walter survive, and I agree with it. But I would give the final season like a 9.2. And if I'm like totaling everything up, I think that it gets to a 9 out of 10, which is the highest rated thing that I've done here. I think that it could be a 10 out of 10. And for me personally, if anyone asks me, I'd say it's like a 10 out of 10 show. It's one of the most perfect shows that I've ever watched. It's the most perfect show that I've ever watched, but it just doesn't... There are a few details that my brain just doesn't fully get it. And yes, it is slow in a few parts, and it speeds up a lot in some parts. And so you just have this show that has really good pacing, because the beginning of the show is to give all the people and all the characters their story, and then the last season is to finish that story. And so that pacing, like at the beginning it might be slower, and at the end it might be faster, because they're trying to finish these stories. But I think that it's just such a good combination, and I'm very glad that I watched this show. It was great. Right now I'm watching Better Call Saul, but it is another 5-6 seasons that I have to watch, so bear with me. I will be probably doing my review on that as soon as I can, but I don't know when I'm gonna finish it. I will be talking about El Camino because it is pretty fresh in my brain. I thought it was a very interesting movie, and I will be explaining a bit more about that. So thank you everyone for watching. I know that like I already made a video explaining that I've been out. I know that I've been out, but I'm glad to be back, and I'm glad to be sharing all of this information with you guys. Thank you everyone for watching this video, and thank you everyone for sticking around to the end. And if you stick around until the end, why not hit the subscribe button? It's free. You don't have to do much. You just hit subscribe. If you're logged in, you're good. But if you're not, you're gonna have to log in. Just hit the subscribe button. It doesn't do anything. And now that I'm gonna be posting a lot more frequently, you guys should definitely be hitting that bell so that you guys get notified every time that I upload a video. Thank you everyone for watching. Take care.